It's important to note in the Unix world that there are actually a variety of Unix shells to choose from, and they're not all the same. So, if we're going to be learning about programming using the Unix shell, we'd better stipulate exactly which shell we're talking about. Anyway, the and most widely supported of all shells is called the Bourne shell, named after the fellow that created it. It was one of the original shells of Unix. The file that contains the Bourne shell, the program, can be found in the file called sh, which is usually located in the /bin directory. While the Bourne shell is not particularly popular as far as interactive login shells go, meaning that when people log in they don't usually find themselves in the Bourne shell, it is overwhelmingly popular as far as shell scripts are concerned. Over 95% of the shell scripts in the world are Bourne shell scripts. And for that reason, we're going to focus just on those scripts and those scripts only. For example, I will not be describing the UNXC shell. I'll discuss what that is in just a moment, but that will be the last time I mention it in this course. Now, the Bourne shell, historically speaking, was one of the first shells in Unix, and as far as interactivity is concerned, in other words, as far as logging in and actually using the shell on a day-to-day basis to run your commands, it's fairly rudimentary. It doesn't offer very many user-friendly features, and so several other shells were developed that were based on the Bourne shell, and these do offer more user-friendly features, such as the Korn shell that was created by a fellow called David Korn. Its file name is KSH, and theoretically you can only get a copy of that if you have a license from, well, I'm not sure from whom, but you have to get a license. Anyway, there is the Born Again shell, or bash, little Unix wit there for you, which is open source and completely free. You can download the source code, compile it yourself, or you can download pre-compiled executables if you like. Bash is particularly popular amongst Linux users on PCs. And then there's ZSH or ZSH and many others. These shells are supposed to be Bourne compatible. What does it mean to say that a shell is Bourne compatible? Written a script to be interpreted using the Bourne shell, then it will theoretically be able to be run by these shells as well. In other words, you could take your script and run it using the Korn shell as the interpreter, or the Born Again shell. However, not all shells are Bourne compatible. In fact, there's a whole family of shells that are not. Specifically, the C shell. There's another little bit of Unix wit there for you. You may or may not have heard of a programming language, a very powerful programming language called C. There was a movement at one stage during early C programmers who worked in Unix that they wanted to have a shell that would offer a programming language that was perhaps more powerful, or at least more similar to their favorite C language. So they created for themselves another shell called the C shell. The programming language of the C shell is slightly different to that of the Bourne shell, and it even offers some features not found in Bourne shell scripting. However, it is more complex to use and is reportedly a little bit buggy, so it is not used very often. We will not be covering it during this course. The C shell in turn spawned its own family of compatible shells, most notably TCSH, but we won't be covering any of those. We're going to focus on the universal Bourne shell. Needless to say that a script created for the Bourne shell will not be able to be run using the C shell, and vice versa. They are incompatible. Very, very ultra simple scripts, of course, will run using either, but as soon as you start to use some of the more powerful language features, you are restricting yourself to one of those two shells.